A natural disaster is still a disaster. 2 8th-level tremors hit today in Turkey and Syria. Hello, this is Henry Keane on UATV channel, wrapping up hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. More than 1,100 people were killed when an earthquake struck central Turkey and northwest of Syria. It was one of the most powerful quakes in the region, at least a century. And then, as if that was not enough, a second powerful shake, hours later, threatened to overwhelm previous rescue efforts. The magnitude 7.8 quake, which hit in early darkness of the winter morning, was followed by another second 7.7 quake in the middle of the day on Monday, as rescues in both countries were still attempting to search for survivors. Thousands more were injured, as the quake literally wiped out entire sections of major cities in a region filled with millions of people who have fled the civil war in Syria. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said 912 people were killed, 5,383 injured, and 2,818 buildings had collapsed. In Syria, already wrecked by more than 11 years of civil war, the health ministry said more than 326 people had been killed and 1,042 injured. In the Syrian rebel-held northwest, rescuers said 147 people had died. All of the hearts in Ukraine today are filled with sincerest and deepest condolences to families of those who have passed away in this catastrophe.
Express my sincere condolences to the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to the Turkish people and families of the victims of the earthquake in the southeast of Turkey. I wish a speedy recovery to all the victims. In this difficult time, we will be close to the Turkish people, ready to provide the necessary assistance to overcome the consequences of the disaster. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Twitter.
Oligarchs and corruption is also a catastrophe for the whole nation. A catastrophe that lingered on for ages in Russia and got its devastating thrive during Putin's reign. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the subsequent privatization of state industries in the Soviet banking system led to the creation of numerous financial industrial groups, so-called FIGs. Initially limited in the scope of their operations, FIGs have expanded their holdings and political influence dramatically over the decades of Putin's reign. A small number of FIGs have created vast empires centered around investment banks and various industries and controlled a significant portion of the Russian economy. Led by oligarchs, these organizations have also exercised almost absolute political and economical influence, especially following the re-election of Boris Yeltsin in 1996. Rising out of the murky mists of the Soviet and subsequent Russian privatization programs, the financial industrial groups, FIGs, have become the centers for elite control and domination of the Russian economy, Russian society, and Russian politics. Originally privatized industrial or banking concerns, FIGs have grown to encompass both industry and banking, and the process developed networks of interest representation that include politicians, media outlets, and private security forces. It was Russia's two-stage privatization process that drove the initial accumulation of extreme wealth in 1990s. The privatization, or explained in simple terms, plundering of medium and large enterprises, involved significant concessions to the firm insiders, resulting them to fall under the ownership of, yes, exactly, the oligarchs. Billionaire wealth from the crony sectors in Russia today is the highest in the world, as a percentage of GDP 18%, followed by Malaysia 13% and the Philippines 11%. It has also risen since 2014 from 16%. The rapid accumulation of the private wealth and its symbiosis with political power is not anything unusual in post-communist societies. However, Russia's vast energy resources, the absolute absence of societal checks on the state, the overwhelming, oppressive, and also absolute power of the security apparatus under Putin have generated a particularly entrenched state-business nexus. Emerging economies, such as South Korea or Latvia, for example, have passed their oligarchic interlude via bottom-up popular pressure. Autocratic rulers and countries such as Belarus and Uzbekistan have disciplined their domestic oligarchs otherwise, top down the crackdowns. Russia, however, has settled into oligarchic equilibrium. Russia's wealth, inequally in all sectors, including infrastructure, health care, science, sports, defense, or you just name it, is the highest in the world. The top 10% of Russian wealth holders own almost 90% of the total household wealth. See for yourself. This is the embodiment of Russian modesty and moderation. Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill Gundyaev, who arrived on a private yacht in the holy places of Valaham, reportedly accompanied by young and beautiful women. Probably nuns. Yeah, I'm sure these were nuns. So, why to be sad? I mean, sad faces can be found anywhere in Russia, for example, having driven 50 kilometers from the border with Moscow, where, like in all the rest of Russia, but not on board the Patriarch's private yacht, with many naked souls gathered on board of a holy yacht for a further private indulgence program by the Russian Patriarch. Putin did actually achieve one goal. He made Russia worldwide prominent in one thing. Not science, since no scientific breakthroughs were done during his usurping reign. No superior space exploration programs took place. No freedom of speech, sex, just freedom of anything already. No. And of course you, dear world, are to blame for this. With your damn civilization, which prevents Russia from developing. Developing downwards, but degradation is also development. It all depends on the point of view, right? And now, being in this hell, at the very bottom of which 98% of the country's population is swarming, and 2% of the oligarchs and their eternal Tsar are dwelling in divine abundance at the top of their incredible mind-boggling wealth, the official Russia is afraid of gay people. Not poverty, not war and regression, not that all the progress, without exception, in the country of Russia is purchased, but gay people. Gay people, everyone knows that in Russia, dream of smashing of the altars of masculinity of every Russian man to smithereens. NATO is a blasphemous bunch of gay and lesbian people, and they are attacking Russia here in Ukraine, according to most of Russians. You know, I have a proposal. Let's gather the army of lovers. Maybe a good smack will help the Russians to understand that no one in the world cares about them. Really. For their palaces, yachts, whores who look like politicians, and politicians who look like whores. No one cares for the riches looted in Russia and paraded in Cannes, Nice, Paris, Berlin, and New York, because thieves of Russia have nothing to be afraid here, the civilized West, because the law reigns here. And in Russia, they just spit on the law. It's what they do. And what is the prison in Russia, after all? There is always a second chance to be recruited for Wagner PMC and go to die for your Botox Mummy Tsar here in Ukraine. Maybe then, when the United Army of Lovers of the world and NATO finally smacks oligarchic Russia with most valuable places, their assets, ladies and gentlemen, maybe then, dear world, then Russia will understand that it is we, the civilized world, that is the guarantee of progress and its driving force, and not a bunch of rabbit hangers on Putin sucking oil from ground and burying the future of the entire nation in the same very ground, no matter how holy calls it Putin's pocket patriarch. Although very unlikely. Russia will understand nothing, just because it's Russia. Putin's Russia really is an example for the whole world. What Putin the Great did to Russia is to replace the law with corruption. Corruption is a new law, a new national idea in Russia. It is what we in Ukraine always knew, and the consequences of which you, dear world, observe since February 2022. Russia can launch a renewed large-scale offensive in Ukraine in the next 10 days. The Financial Times, FT, reports, citing an unnamed advisor to the Ukrainian military. According to the source, Kyiv has received very solid intelligence of intent by Russia to mount another offensive. The advisor added that such an attack could be launched within roughly 10 days. FT analysts believe that the most likely place where a new Russian attack will be unleashed is the western part of the Lugansk region near Kreminna and Lyman, the area that was recaptured by Ukraine during its counteroffensive in autumn 2022. Well, according to ISW, Institute Study of War, Putin may have overestimated the Russian military's own capabilities again, as Institute previously assessed. Yeah, just maybe. Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov supported ISV's assessment and possibly suggested that Russian forces have mobilized substantially more personnel for an imminent offensive. Reznikov stated on February 2nd that Russian forces are preparing to launch an offensive, likely in eastern or southern Ukraine. Reznikov stated also that Ukrainian officials estimate that the number of mobilized Russian personnel is higher than the Kremlin's official 300,000 figure. He also said that the Kremlin mobilized 500,000 Russian soldiers, although it is unclear whether this figure refers to Russian force generation efforts following the start of the partial mobilization in September of 2022 or the total number of forces that Russia has committed to the war in Ukraine. What is clear, dear world, that the mobilization of 300,000 Russian citizens generated far-reaching domestic social ramifications and provisioning challenges, and the further covert mobilization would likely produce similarly noticeable problems. Hopefully, the problems that will become deadly for Putin's version of modern Russia. It was Henry Keane on UATV channel explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more.